I was being asked is, how do you draft some geometry over an existing geometry, right? Because snapping in 3D is pretty tough. If I were to draw, like, let's say a 3" by 3" rectangle here, and I know it's going to be located on this level, all I have to do is find a reference point to start with. So if I start from here and go this way, I can type in 3 inches, and then, you know, go this direction, and my ortho is on, so I can snap, and then go this direction 3 inches, and then go down 3 inches, and then hit C to close. So I kind of have drafted a rectangle or square on that plane. The other option, or you know, quick tip is, let's say you're drafting on top of this level, but you have too many layers and you're grabbing on the wrong points. You may want to isolate where you're drafting. So let's say I'm drafting something on top of this layer. What I could do is select those geometries and then go to the visibility tab, and I can press this button, which basically inverts my selection and then hides the object. So it will isolate only those 3 solids. So if I press that, it will just temporarily isolate everything, like isolate my selection, so that now it will be easier, because now I can draft on it. But I want you to still be precise. So if you're starting from here, let's say 3 inches, then go this way. Yeah. Just press the light bulb. It will just turn on everything back on. This is temporarily hide. Visibility is temporarily, you're overriding visibility properties of geometries. So if I want to temporarily hide something, I can just select it, press the hide objects button, which is the turned off light bulb. It will just hide those objects, but you're not deleting them or turning their layer off. You're just temporarily hiding them. And then if you want to bring them, you can just click on show objects. It's like turns them on, basically. And if you want to isolate them, you can select the geometry and press this one, which is kind of a shortcut of inverting the selection, hiding everything else, and leaving this on the screen. Okay? Now, I'm actually going to bring some of these blocks that I had yesterday and just drop them in here to show you how I prepared my section drawing, so that you can at least get an idea. I think I put this guy somewhere here. Let's see. I'm going to just keep editing my model a bit, so that, let's say, this guy is located here. Maybe a bit more, so maybe it goes here. And then, so although your landscape is, like, the drawing is going to be extended, your physical model still needs to stay within 13 by 18. Okay, you cannot exceed that limit. So this guy, I'm going to make, let's say 1 inch. Say 1. So it kind of cantilevers like that. Does everybody see that? So I just placed this one, and then I'm going to place this one as well. So I'm going to group this block and bring this guy in somewhere here, and then rotate it 90 degrees, move it up, let's extend this guy as well. So I can use, again, scale 1D, same stuff I showed you yesterday, just extend them. This guy, let's move it here. So it kind of cantilevers as well, partially. So kind of the idea is you enter here, and then you go around these stairs, and then you go up, and then you can access this volume, and then you can access the other volume through it, right? It's really simple. Don't copy my design for this assignment. And I'm going to bring this down. Let's say this guy, let's line it up with something else. So I'm going to scale this up and line it up here. And I actually wanted to have this guy line up with this. So I'm going to ungroup my block, choose this wall, and do scale 1D. Right? I can do this type of stretching here. And pick up this as a reference point so that they line up. Okay? So that's my physical model with the two blocks added on top of it. And I'm going to hide everything else. Now let me show you the clipping plane. This is, before you do your sections, you should look at your model using the clipping plane. So if you type in clipping plane, you're going to do a line and an extension of it. So let's say my clipping plane, I'm going to choose vertical because I'm going to look at sections for now. Start of an edge goes from here to here, and then I'm basically defining a rectangle plane, right? And this arrow shows me the visibility side of the clipping plane. So this basically cuts in any solid model in the view and then trims the rest of it. So if I move this towards my model, you're going to see it taking out of the portion, the solid portion of it, right? And if I move around and look at it from this view and move in, I can actually see how my section is changing. Sure. So the clipping plane is, you just type in clipping plane, and I chose vertical, and draw a line here, and then go up. That's the plane, and this is the visible side of the plane. Visible side of the plane. So it basically filters my model, right? If I rotate this three-dimensionally and make it look planar, then it's going to do the same operation in plan. And that's how basically I can see where to cut my plan, where to cut my sections, before I even generate those drawings, right? So it helps me study the model a bit more. Yeah. Let me do it again. Clipping plane. You can draw in a rectangle, but in my case, I want the clipping plane to be vertical, so I choose the vertical option. And then it says start edge, so you can just draw a line for the edge of the rectangle, and then go up, and then look this way, right? And then I'm moving this in. I think I'm snapping. My movement is snapping to grid snap. You don't have to take pictures of it. I'm recording my session. Are you guys watching these videos? The command is clipping plane. For the sections, I'm choosing the vertical option. For plans, I'm just going to draw a rectangle. So for the section, vertical, draw a line, and then it's requiring a height. It actually doesn't matter where I stop, because it could be like it just drops in a square, and this is infinite. Like even if my clipping plane doesn't physically cut the model, like I'm going to move it around a bit so that you guys can see. Even if my clipping plane ends there, it will still cut the model. It's like an infinite plane, right? So all that matters is defining that object, and it physically intersects with my model. So I can find like a nice spot to draw the section from. So I could draw a section from here. I could draw a section from here. Like this wouldn't be a good section, right? It's not worth drawing because there isn't much happening. So I'm trying to find a nice section to draw, like something that has multiple volumes, multiple levels, and something that can have hierarchy, cut elements, something that shows like the main design features of my model. So something maybe that goes through this this canal, this tunnel, and cuts through these two volumes. I think this will be a nice section. Another one might be these stairs, right? So I can cut one more here. If you want, you can turn off the grid snap so that your displacement could be more floating. So I could find out where I want to cut. So let's say I want to cut it somewhere here. This is also a not bad section. But in this case, all that will be pochéed would be this landscape, this ground here, and everything else would be in elevation, right? So I can do two sections like this. Let's look at it from the other side. So I'm going to rotate my clipping plane this way, and then I'm going to move the clipping plane again. So maybe this could be a section, right? So it shows this side of the project, like this staircase, this stuff in elevation, and this ground relationship. Or I could go in this way. Or maybe I don't want to look at this view, I want to look at the other view. So that's we could also change that. So if you choose your clipping plane and go to your properties tab, there's flip direction option. So if you do flip direction, you see that this arrow changes. It's basically you're flipping the direction of visibility for the clipping plane, right? Because it's filtering the data, right? So it's kind of going back and forth of which side of the model to show you. So it's always showing you where the arrow faces, basically. Okay, so my section could be this way too. How to do that? Actually, maybe right. Yes, so I'm going to show you how to get drawings out of your 3D model now. So I'm going to rotate my clipping plane. I'm going to shoot for doing the same section that I did for like what I showed you. I'm going to do the same thing. Alright, this guy. I'm going to do this one, okay? And show you how to do it. So I'm going to move my clipping plane to a location where I'm happy with the section. So it's something like this. Now, here's the thing. Since your sections are going to extend the landscape a bit as well, you can also add those geometries. So let's say this is my design, 13 by 18. I need an additional 5 inches here, right? And then another 10 inches the other way. I'm just going to add a solid block for that for now. So the clipping plane, I'm going to deactivate for now. I'm going to uncheck the perspective here so that it's deactivated on this view. And I'm going to come in here and make a Mullen extension. So this guy, scale 1D, the base, I'm going to make it 23 this way, and then 23 this way. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm just making like, because my section is going to extend, right? My model stops at 18, but I want it to be a consistent 23-inch section. So I'm just extending my solid model because I can. And I'm going to do the same scale here. Scale 1D, this goes out. Actually, let's bring another solid block here. Scale 1D, this comes in. Copy this guy, move it here. Scale 1D. And copy this guy, scale 1D. Right? So I'm assuming my landscape is something like this. And this is like on a podium, basically. Yeah? Yes, so the plan drawing, if I were to draft it like this is going to be all single layer, and this is kind of on a podium, right? But I'm leaving it up to you. You can add further elements here as well. Just don't make it too crowded. I still want to read that 13 by 18 designed element. You could also like extend 5 inches here and 5 inches the other way, right? This plan could be located anywhere on that 23 by 23. Okay? It could be vertical, horizontal. It's really up to you.
Okay. If you added the extensions on one side, can we add it to the other side?
Yeah, you can. Yeah, you can. This could be anywhere. You can just offset like 2 inches on all sides if you wanted. I'm just adding these because when I do the drawing, I want to get those reference lines, if that makes sense. I just want something to draft. And since this is my ground level, I'm going to add stairs here. So it's kind of the idea is it goes underground, and then I kind of access this tunnel, right? And I can also add like a staircase to access above, but I won't be able to show that. I will only be able to show it in my plan drawing. So let's do, I'm going to grab these stairs, make a copy, move them here, and I'm going to rotate them this way. And I'm going to grab it from this point and move it here. My rotation didn't work. Rotate. Move. Yeah, now it's flush. And I'm going to do scale 1D, compress this guy up to here. So stairs fit. Right, so I'm kind of going underground to access this space. And this guy, I'm going to make it into a block. Right? So this is kind of the idea. So I come in here, go underground, or I can come in here as well. And then climb up here. Alright, so far so good? Any questions so far? Now, extend the landscape. So this guy is 13 by 18. In order to like generate the full section, I just, increase the landscape. I started with my base, this guy. I just did scale 1D, one way, made it 23, the other way 23. And that's what was being asked. Like, this could actually be located here as well, so I could push it 5 inches this way if I want. And then I add the blocks here too, so it could be located anywhere you want on your drawing. Okay, for me it's going to be the right bottom of my drawing. And I'm going to choose my clipping plane back again and check the perspective tab to activate my section. So this is kind of the outline of my section. By the way, these graphic styles, like when you right click here, you go to shaded, wireframe, ghosted. All of these properties you can override them. If you go to tools, options, under view tab, Rhino options view tab, display modes are located here. And you can override their properties. Another way to access this window is by right clicking to the viewport and going to display options. So if I want to say, if I want to see this cut lines in my section through the clipping plane in a different color or different line weight, I can override them here. So I could go under display modes, rendered. If I go all the way down, my clipping plane objects are located here. Right? So what I could do is the show edges, color usage, planes, it says planes color. So I could put the plane to a different color layer and it will change the Poché lines here. So if I put this guy, go to object properties and put my clipping plane to, let's say, the CRV layer, it's going to make the cut elements appear in red, right? And if I want to see them thicker, I could go to the display options again, go all the way down. Edge thickness is here, right? So I'm under show edges, color usage reads plane's color, which is red, and then edge thickness is 3. If I bump this up to, let's say, 6, it's going to thicken those lines, so I can see better where I'm cutting and what the cut elements look like in my model. Okay? This is actually a really powerful tool. You can even create graphic elements to be used for your designs. Maybe I can do this before your final. But you can prepare really nice drawings like shaded views, line weights, like highlights. Like for instance, I can enable edge lines in rendered view as well. Right now I'm overriding the properties of the rendered view. If I come down here and give some edge thickness under surface edge settings, edge thickness is right now set to 0. If I make it 2, I'll get lines around blocks. Right? When this is 0, I don't get anything. When I bump this up, I start seeing lines drawn around the edges of the solid blocks, which helps me identify geometry. Right? So maybe keep it at 1. So it's kind of really light and makes it look nicer as well. Okay? So I'm going to do 2 things. I'm going to generate a section drawing. I'm going to create a layer here and generate the section lines, and then I'm going to make 2D of what the view is and use that as a 2D template to override in Illustrator. Okay? So having the clipping plane here, this is the section I'm going to draw. I'm going to come down here to new layer and then create a new layer called section, and let's give it a name. Let's make it magenta. And I'm going to double click onto that layer to make it active, and then my command is section. So it says select objects for sections. I'm going to select everything in my model. Normally you can do this in 2 ways. You could have a drafting line here where you want the section to be, so I can trace the bottom line of my clipping plane, and then I could just deactivate my clipping plane or delete it even. So I can use this line to specify where I want to cut my section from. Right? Let's do it this way first. So I do section. It says select objects for sections. I'm going to select everything in my physical environment, from my model. And then I'm going to right click, and it says start of section. You want to start, you just want to draw a line essentially. So I'm going to draw, I'm going to trace this line that I have. This is the end of my section. And you want to enable extend section. You want to make it extend section, yes. And right click. I'm not sure if you guys can see it, but it kind of slices the model to give me these lines. Does everybody see those lines? So that's basically the physical intersection of that section line and my physical model. I'm going to do it again. So I type in section. Select objects for sections. Choose the solid model. Right click to confirm. Have extend section enabled. It says start of section. You just want to draw a line where the section is to be cut. And then once you see the section outlines drawn, just right click to confirm so you get your section. And since I had this layer activated, those lines will be placed into that layer. Okay? That's kind of the first part of getting the geometries on the section. The second part is, let me actually wait for this. This is to the clipping plane actually. But I'll bring it back. Let's do vertical, draw a line again and model something over there. I can do the section command and use the clipping plane outline. you can do that if you want. But I would recommend you to deactivate the clipping plane so that when you select the model to cut the section from, you can select everything, because otherwise you may be missing stuff for the section generation. Right, so now the next thing I'm going to do is I have section lines there, and the next thing is I need to find an orthographic view that sees this section perpendicularly, right? So what is that view? If I go to my front view, it looks closer to the same view, but I'm not seeing the clipping plane here, because when you select the clipping plane, the front view is deselected under the clipping plane options properties. So if you activate that as well, the clipping plane will be active in that viewport too. Right? So this is kind of filtering which viewport you want the clipping plane to be active. So we want an orthographic view where we could generate our section, right? Something like this would work. And the next command I'm going to run is make 2D, which is basically going to take any physical model and convert it into a line drawing. Okay? And in this case, I want to convert this into a line drawing. So I'm going to type in make 2D. I'm going to choose everything that I see in this viewport, and then right click, and this will give me a 2D drawing option. And what I want to enable is to maintain the source layers of things, so that if I have things that are located on the section plane, I want them to be on a different layer. If I want elements that are in the back in elevation, I can put them on a different layer. I can enable show hidden lines as well, but for this orthographic view you don't have to do that. We're going to do that for axonometric drawings later on, but technically we'll be using make 2D command a lot to convert our 3D models into 2D drawings. So I'm going to do drawing layout. I want it to be placed on the current view. I'm going to do maintain source layers. So I'm going to hit OK, see what we get. So your drawing, if you double click here and go to top view, your drawing will be placed on the top view. So I'm going to type in move and move it out a bit, so I get kind of an outline for my drawing. Let me see. I actually didn't get the sections, so let me see if I'm missing something. Make 2D tangent edges. No. Which one was it? So if you don't get these lines, the section lines, what I want you to do is go to that viewport where you generated the section, turn off your solid forms, turn them off, and just isolate your section lines, which are these, right? And then you can run make 2D on top of them as well. So you can do this operation like twice. So this is the cut lines for my geometry, and these are what I'm seeing in elevation in the back. So this also needs a bit of cleanup. I'm missing some geometry here, though I shouldn't be. The other way is to, let me see, where are my drafting lines? make sure you get these drawings somewhere that you can further edit them, because we are technically drafting as well, right? So these are 2D elements. The other option you can do is take the section lines, copy them, move them here. I mean, Make 2D didn't do a good job. Sometimes the geometry intersection doesn't work. Like it missed these lines here, but it did a pretty good job with the elevation. What I could do is I could overlap this guy with this one. So I could like technically flip it back, rotate it to line it up with this one. So the way to do it is to use the rotate 3D command. So you do rotate 3D. You choose these geometries, these lines. Start of rotation axis, just draw a straight line at the bottom of your lines and enter 90 degrees. Let's say 90, negative 90 in my case. Rotate 3D, choose these lines, draw a line for rotation and enter negative 90. So it kind of flips it along that edge. Right? So I basically get elements in elevation and elements in section. And they need to overlap. But I'm kind of keeping them separate because I want to edit this further and this further. Okay. Let me try doing this again. Make 2D. I mean, this would be the most precise way of doing it. Sometimes, like, it cuts the geometry, but it won't tell you what is cut and what isn't, right? And that's why when you make 2D, it's best to get a perfect section outlined on a different layer so that you can edit it for Poché elements. Okay? Sure. Sure. So what I did was, let's see, show. Where's my clipping plane? This other section. So we placed the clipping plane to study the model, right? So I found this point to be a good location to draw a section from. And then the next thing I did was, keeping the clipping plane over there, I drew a section to get the intersection of my section line with the physical model, right? So I can get these outlines of the geometries that I'm cutting. And I put them on a separate layer because I want to see them on a different color, so that I can play around with them, I can join them, I can add Poché to them in Illustrator later on, because these are going to be all shaded black, right? And the rest of the stuff I'm seeing in elevation, right? So if you look at here, this stuff is not cut. They're seen in elevation. The only cut stuff is the ones that are highlighted in magenta, and I want to see them in a different layer. Okay? So to get those lines, what I did was I run the section command, and I chose my physical model, and then I drew a line along the clipping plane to get these lines, these geometries. So let me undo it. And then let me select those lines. So these are the section lines I got, right? Basically, I want to see the intersected geometries at the location of the section. So I put them on a different layer. These lines, these outlines. And then the next thing is to get everything else in the model. And to do that, I went to an orthographic view that sees my section, which is my front view. And within the front view, I selected the whole model and typed in Make 2D command. So I've typed in Make 2D. And what Make 2D does is it converts a physical model into a two-dimensional line-based drawing, right? So this will be kind of an outline or template for me to use for drafting my section. But what I also want is to overlap it with the section lines so that I can add a Poché to these elements. So if I were to bring this on top of the actual section, the lines that you're seeing as highlighted will be shaded. They will be Poché because they're cut, right? But the other remaining black lines will be lighter because they are not cut elements. They're seen in elevation. Yeah. Sure. When you type in Make 2D, it says Select Objects to Draw. You want to select your physical model. Right click, and then in this View tab, you want to enable Maintain Source Layers. And I also enabled Show Tangent Edges. It basically brings more lines for you to use. And here you can edit the layer names these objects are going to be stored in. So what Rhino does is it looks at your geometry and looks at your viewport to generate the 2D drawing. And each visible line, it puts it into this layer. And since I have Maintain Source Layers enabled, I get these layer tabs created when I run Make 2D command. So I get like a Make 2D layer created, and under that, under visible lines, I get these layers created that separate geometries per layer based on the layers they are located in. Okay? So basically, the idea is to get cut elements through section and elements in elevation. Okay? And what I want to do is further edit the lines in the section. So I come in here, I want to run trim, choose all the lines in the section, and then I want to clean it up so that when I join them, it becomes one single outline for the section. So I'm going to clean these geometry lines because that's how it was modeled. This guy as well. So I basically get cleaner outlines for the geometry. Okay? Does everybody see it? That's the outline for my Poché elements. Look at my model. So in my model, this is a wall. If I had built this out of stacked layers, then when I do Make 2D, I'm going to get all those lines. And what you need to do is clean them up so that you get like a single surface there, because it's a wall surface. Okay? We'll be able to add lines later on, like horizontal hatches or something like that, but this will make it a lot easier and cleaner to work with. Now, the point of generating a section is so that we can highlight the cut elements easier, right? So these are my cut elements. Then the next thing is to differentiate the elements in elevation. So what I'm going to do is move this guy somewhere here. If you want to be more precise, like you could just select these edges and then type in join. And you can run the hatch command, right? Select all of these and add a black fill to them. Kind of previewing what's going to happen in Illustrator, basically, because we're going to hatch these. They are cut elements. And then I can overlap this with my actual cut section. I mean, the section view that we did Make 2D. So all these lines are going to be like played around with in line weights, and then we're going to see this black line as cut elements. So it's going to be kind of a nice contrast. So we will be immediately able to differentiate what is in elevation and what is in section, what is cut and what is seen in elevation in the back, right? Now, absolutely. So we are cutting the ground as well as solid blocks of things, right? So these blocks are cut and these ground lines are cut as well, and everything has the same nominal thickness, 1/8 inches. Now, you may also have to do a little bit more drafting here. For instance, this line I just got, I need to make sure that that line actually exists as geometry. So if I look at my model again, and this is what I would recommend you to do. Bring up 2 viewports. So top view is where you're going to do your drafting, right? So I can like minimize these 2 views and then keep like a clipping plane view of your 3D model on the side of it. I got this line because I have 2 geometries here, right? So Rhino still gave me this edge here when I did make 2D command, because it's registering 2 volumes there that overlap and it gives me an edge. But technically that edge is continuous, so we shouldn't see this line here in elevation. So what I need to do is use trim and then get rid of that line, so this reads as a continuous surface, right? That's the same thing you will have to do if your model is stacked. So I want you to come down here, and if you have like 8 things stacking up here, you need to delete them and make them into one single wall line, right? So it looks clean. So this guy is this wall basically, and then these 2 lines come from these 2, right? And you can also create some layers here. For instance, these lines belong to this model in the back, and they have to be further, like they're further in the back, so they have to be lighter. So I can create some layers here if I want. So I can create, let's say, back lines, give it kind of a different color, and then these I know that are all the way in the back, I can put them onto that layer, so I can make them lighter in line weight when I open them in Illustrator. Same thing for these 2 edges. So these lines come from these, they're also further in the back, so I can put them onto the same layer. Let's look up here. This line that comes from this geometry, this guy, they're further back as well. So I can put them onto a different layer. And these guys are flush with this wall. Does everybody see that? So this surface is connected with this surface. So what I need to do is connect them here. So I have to do trim and delete it. So this becomes a single surface, right? It's basically the closest elements to my view. Then the next closest element is these 2 walls, like these lines that belong to this wall in the back. And then the ones that I put into this layer, the back lines, they are the lightest, they're further in the back. So I can make some line weight hierarchy using this information as well. So I'm kind of coordinating my model with my section, okay? Technically, you could have all these solids in different layers, and when you make 2D, if you have maintain source layers enabled, you'll get them all in different line weights, different layers drafted, but then you will still have to make decisions. Like, you still have to know which ones are closest to your, relative to your section, right? Now, this is kind of an outline I have. What I'm further going to do is add some hatches to it, and use those hatches in Illustrator basically. So first thing is we could create a hatch layer. Let's make it green. I'm going to switch to that layer. Let's say we had a hatch here, another hatch here, and maybe another hatch to this wall here, right? So it's kind of maybe like a horizontal parallel lines. So I'm going to do a rectangle here. This is kind of similar to the drafting exercise you guys did. And then I'm going to trace the outline of the surface here. Because hatches work with polyline close polylines. So I'm going to type in hatch. I'm going to choose my polyline. I'm going to come into hatch 1. So I can use this, which will make it look like actually your stacked layer model. But I'm going to change the pattern scale. Let's make it 0.4 and keep it horizontal. I'm going to do another one here and here, and these I'm going to rotate 90 degrees, and we can change the scale as well. So let's make them 0.8. Right, so they're in a different layer, and I'm going to make them really light, so they're like kind of represent the wall pattern. Yeah, I mean I'm just making these vertical and this one horizontal. You can make these sorts of like 2-direction hatches, and you can change the densities as well. I'm leaving it up to you. Like, see what looks best, right? No, not all thing. Like, if there's an element you want to highlight, like a room you want to highlight, a surface you want to highlight, just add a hatch to that, right? Like, I'm going to leave this one as white. I'm not going to add anything there. So this is kind of an outline for what I'm going to import into Illustrator. My front view is flipped, so I cannot see the model anymore in this view, but I can see it in the back view. I think since I'm flipping the direction of my clipping plane, I need to also look at it from the same viewpoint. So I need to come down here, right click to the viewport, go to set view, and those 6 views you'll be able to see here. So there's top, bottom, left, right, front, and back, right? By default, they are set to top, front, and right. You can come down here and switch to back. And then you'll be able to see the right corresponding orthographic view to my section. Alright, so then I can use this viewport to do make 2D here, and then get the same section lines basically. I can use the same section lines. So let's do that. So I'll come in here. The section lines are going to be the same, they're just going to be mirrored. But I'm going to do make 2D again. I'm going to choose everything that I see here, right click, and hit OK. If I go to my top view, this is the other side of that section. And what I'm going to do is grab the section lines here. I'm selecting them through the layer they created it. So I right click to the section, do select objects. So I grab those and make a copy of them here. And I'm going to do a mirror because the section, we flipped the direction, right? So it's going to look into the other view. I'm going to mirror it. I'm going to turn copy off, so I'm going to make it no. I'm going to just draw a perpendicular line. So my section is flipped. Now if I place it here, I can still use it, right? So it's kind of the same. The same elements are cut, but I'm looking to the other view, to the other side of the clipping plane. Does that make sense to everyone? Huh? Okay. And I can basically hide these, add another hatch. And that's kind of the outline for the other section. So I need to clean up these stairs. I can do trim. Clean these up. I can further study these edges. Probably this is going to be cleaned up as well. It's a connected surface. And that's kind of the same section looking to the other way. I'm going to put these on another layer. Okay. Choose these hatches and type in explode so that they become individual lines. And that's basically it. I mean, this is basically what I'm going to bring in to Illustrator to use. And if you want to make sure that they're going to fit onto your sizes, like sheet sizes, you can draw an 11 by 23 rectangle around them to use. So this guy would go here, right? So I have two drawings, and I'm going to select both of them, go to File, Export Selected, Adobe Illustrator, Sections. Now, what's my model scale? 1:1. Hit OK. Let's open it in Illustrator. So my drawings are here. If you remember, we had a template. So I'll get it again. Let me see if it's here. Open recent files. I think it's this guy. So I could use this too. Right, so I can bring it here and line it up here. I'm going to grab these two, go to Show Options. You want to make sure that Paste to Members Layers is enabled. I'm going to Control C and Control V. Now let's take these out. Let's put this guy here. My guides, I'm going to delete them for now. This guy, let's put it here. I'm going to go to View, Snap to Grid turned off, View, Guides, where's the snap to point? Hide grid. You don't need to see the grid. So that's my first section. I'm going to put my second section here. Okay? And now let's play around with line weights a bit. So my hatch layer is here. I'm going to select all the hatches. Go to line weights. Make it light, 0.2. And make it black. Let's see how that looks. I think it could be slightly lighter. So we could choose it. 0.1. Right? So the outline edge is thicker than the infill hatch. This line is going to be thicker than the hatch and lighter than this outline because that outline is closer to my view, right? Do you guys remember the hierarchy? So this wall is the first wall that I'm seeing in section, and the back lines are further back. So I'm going to choose this guy and make this 0.4 and go to stroke, make it black. And these guys are second in line, so let's make them a bit lighter. So I'm going to make them 0.8. Right, right? So this is 0.8. This is 1. And the hatches are 0.1. So that's kind of the hierarchy. And my Poché is fully bled with the sheet. Okay? I'm going to wait here for you to get to something like this, because then I'm going to show you how to add shadows and silhouettes. That's the last thing we're going to add. Yeah. So this is my section, right? When I do make 2D, I choose everything. Under drawing layout, don't do current view, do current C-plane. Hit OK. Your drawing will be in place, generated in place, so then you can move it out. Right? If you do current view, it will put it on top view. It will make it flat on top view. I mean, you can draft it technically on the front, like front view here, and then just bring in your section aligned with it. It will be a lot easier, I think, rather than doing 3D rotations. Right, so my section, if I generate the section again, now I can line them up easier. That's my section, that's my make 2D. And I can line them up in front view. Let's say you had trouble getting the hatches correctly in Rhino. I'm going to actually delete these guys. Right, so let's say I got something like this. The reason why I put them on a different layer is because I could use these objects directly for adding fills in Illustrator. There's a way to do that, and it's called the Paint Bucket tool. So what you do is first choose the objects you want to use for Paint Bucket, and then go to the Shape Builder tool, Live Paint Bucket, and then once you're in Live Paint Bucket, you want to click on the objects to activate them or to group them, so that you can add fills to them. So after you click, you'll recognize that Illustrator can detect these areas where they are fillable, basically. And then what I do is set up a fill and stroke here that will complement my Poché. So my fill is going to be a black fill. So I add a black fill here. And my stroke is going to be none, so that I don't put line weights, because we are filling the Poché, right? We don't want additional thicknesses for these. It doesn't work over there, so you can add it here too. So I make it none. And then if I come in here with this setting, fill and stroke setting, I could add my Pochés to these areas manually, right? So that you can also do these sorts of edits, and it's nice to have everything that will be Pochéed in a single layer, so that you can directly create a paint bucket for them. Because what Paint Bucket does is it groups these objects together, right? So once you do this operation, it's kind of like a final edit operation. And then I can bring in the other layers in the back. Okay? Let's start with the silhouettes and trees. I basically uploaded a lot of these images on T-Square. If you go to Resources, Silhouettes, People, there are tons of Illustrator files there with the outlines of these silhouettes. All you have to do is just open one, bring the profile scale it in the right size, and then use it basically. Right? Same thing with the trees. So one thing I added to the trees was transparency. So in this image, I kind of added some transparency and overlapped them, changed different sizes, so you can just like make it more interesting, right? So it's like a background. I put them mostly on the background, and don't add them like full black. I added the silhouettes black because I think they complement the section, but I like the trees kind of lighter in the background. And the shadow though is I actually spent some time yesterday trying to streamline how to get shadows easily from Rhino, because these viewports, when you rendered view, you can see that we have some preliminary shading happening. You guys see that? Like this surface is shaded different than this surface, although they're the same material. It's because Rhino is using a default light position to calculate whether that surface takes light or not. So it kind of helps you also visually orient these solids. For this one though, I did a simple Rhino rendering and laid it in the background of my drawing so that I can use its shadows basically. And I'll show you how to do that. It's going to be super simple. So to do this, make a copy of your site model because we're going to slice it up. So I'm just going to grab this guy, make a copy of it. And then I went to the top view. I know my section line is here. So if you copy it with your section line, it's better. If not, you can just draw another line. In the top view, I run the split command. Split. I select my model, and then I choose my line. Right click. And what it's going to do is basically, it's going to intersect the line with all the geometries, and it's going to slice them up. And what you want to do is delete the part that wouldn't be visible on your section. So I can do this two ways. I can select them using the marquee. So if you go from left to right and go just past beyond the section line, you can just grab a marquee. These are the elements we don't need, basically. So I'm going to delete it. These are the curves I had. I'm going to delete them as well. And this is how my model looks like. So I technically physically cut the model. I'm not using clipping plane. I physically cut it because I'm going to take a shadow rendering. Then the next thing is I go to the front view, and in this viewport, delete. That's why I made a copy of it, because you will lose the geometry you're deleting. And this is just to get a shadow rendering. And then in this viewport, I switch to rendered. Let me see. Go to render, current renderer, switch to Rhino render. I'm curious what we're gonna get. Render tools. Yeah, that's what I get. And that's what I want actually, which is perfect. So just go to render, current renderer, Rhino render. No materials, no sunlight settings, no nothing basically. We're just like taking a rendering shot with shadows, and you're just going to use it to lay it in the background of our drawing. It's really simple production. It's really simple pipeline. So go here, switch to Rhino render, and then you can do this though. You can go to render settings and bump up your resolution for your rendering. So you could do the resolution, let's say 3200 by 2400. You can bump up the DPI to 150. Huh? The render settings. So I went to render tools, render settings. It's located under here. Render Tools tab, the third one. Render Settings, and it just opens you the Render Tools options. And under the background, I'm going to switch to transparent background. This is the only thing you need to do if you don't want a black background. So I enable transparent background, hit OK. Now I'm going to hit render again. So I got something like this. I'm going to go to Save Image. Save as type, I'm going to choose PNG. This is really important. If you don't choose PNG, you won't have the transparent background. If you save it as JPEG, you would have a complete black image. But if you do with PNG, you wouldn't get the background saved as a pixel. So I'm going to do it shadows. And make sure that Save Alpha Channel is enabled as well. So I'm going to save it. Close it. Now that image is here. And it looks like this. Okay? What do you think we are going to do with it? Huh? Yeah. So I'm going to bring it in to my Illustrator. Now here's the important thing. After you bring it in, put it in another layer. Create a new layer here. Put it into that layer. Call it shadow. And I want you to lock every other layer so that you won't be able to select anything else but this guy. Because what we are going to do is dynamic scaling. I'm going to be scaling this thing up until it lines up with my model. So I will hold Shift on my keyboard and stretch it until it lines up. Huh? Well, because of the Rhino render, there is no way of snapping the viewport exactly to fit the image. So this will happen because we are basically generating a pixel-based image using the viewport. So I'm trying to find out where my do it back and forth. So it has to shrink a bit more. Use the keyboard to nudge it. It has to shrink a bit more. I got it close enough, right? So now I'm going to line it up with exactly where I need it to be. And then here's the trick. Go to Opacity tab. Make it, let's start with 30%. Sure. That's basically shadows. Okay? I actually looked up on YouTube. Nobody shows how to make this. There is no single video I couldn't find. And I'm like wondering why not? Huh? I should post it probably. Yeah. I mean, it's just something simple and I think it makes it look a lot better, no? Just like shadow lines. And super simple to make. Like, I think that's the point of preparing a digital file. Because you have a physical model, you can do so much with it. You could do drawings, sections, I mean, renderings. It has all the information you need. You can just reuse it. This is for Thursday, yeah. You will be just fine with this. Huh? Split again? Sure. So I made a copy of my model with where I cut my section from. right? And then in top view, I run the split command. And look at what it says. It says select objects to split. I chose the model. And then it asks you to select the cutting object, which is this line. Huh? I selected my whole model. You need to select the objects you want to cut first, and then the cutting object, which is my line. Okay? Then right click. I'm going to do the other side this time. So I'm going to delete everything on the other side. Huh? Splitting has failed. So I'm going to come to the back view this time and see what we get. So I got something like this time. And if you want to see the alpha channel is something like this. It basically shows you, the white shows you the solid objects, and the black is transparent. But what we want to save is the actual RGB channel, which is the rendering. So I'm going to save this guy, call it shadow 2. And do the same overlap in Illustrator. So I'm going to bring this guy in first. Sure. So settings, go to Rhino's render settings. What I did was I bumped up the resolution. You can, if you want it to be like a ridiculous resolution, you can go to custom and bump up the size to like 6000 by 8000. It will still be fast because we are doing like a really simple rendering. So you can just enter. Did you go to the render tools? Yes. Render settings? Yes. Rhino render? Did you switch under render tool? Current renderer to Rhino render. It may be by default set to V-Ray for Rhino. I'm switching to Rhino render. Did you do that? Okay, switch to this because it's out of use right now. If this is set to V-Ray for Rhino, you're using the plugin. But I'm using Rhino's built-in engine for render. Then you should be able to access the Rhino render options. And under resolution, you could choose one of the presets or go to custom. You can bump this up. I don't think you would need more than 6000 by 4000 and DPI 150. Anti-aliasing is kind of refining edges. You can keep it at normal. And the other thing I did was transparent background. That's really important to save the PNG file so that you don't get a background color. Okay, that's all you have to do. Yes, 6000 by 4000, sorry. 6000 by 4000. And then background, transparent background. And hit OK, and then I just hit render. In the view where I'm seeing the section, right? That's the point. And hopefully it won't crash. No, it does this flicker, but then it brings the render back. I don't know why. It worked fine on my desktop last night. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's. I mean, for something simple like this, it shouldn't take 10 minutes. It should take like a minute max. So this is done. And I'm going to save it. I'm going to override the file, shadow 2. Don't forget to enable save alpha channel and save it as PNG. And then I'm going to delete this, close this guy. It should be a big file though because of the pixels dimensions. Anyhow, so section shadow 2 is here. I'm going to bring it in Illustrator again. As you can see, this is a lot larger in size. And I'm going to line this up with the drawing above. Here is a trick. I mean, you may want to do this actually if you want. You can draw a border around this image for alignment, right? You can draw a border around this image, or even better, you can open it in Photoshop and crop it in Photoshop. And so when you bring it here, all you have to do is align it to the size of the page so that it lines up with your drawing perfectly, right? But you can also do it here. I think this would be a bit trickier. Actually, let me do it in Photoshop. Let's use some tools for this. So I'm going to open it in Photoshop. So I'm going to open the file, the latest PNG I saved, and this is what I'm talking about when I mentioned transparency. The checkerboard is transparency. So if you're seeing the checkerboard, there is no registered pixel in the file, and that's the point of saving the rendering as a PNG, because there is no background in our model technically, right? So when we render it, we shouldn't get any pixel for that. It should be just transparent. And that helps us just overlap this with physical geometries in our drawing. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to, I think it's here, the top fifth one. There's crop tool. So I'm going to choose crop. Sorry. So I'm going to choose crop and draw a rectangle around my image. Make sure that you're capturing everything. And then zoom in, hold spacebar, left click, and find the pixel where the image stops on this end. Find the pixel where the image stops at the bottom. And find the pixel where the image stops on the left. I think it's kind of snapping to them automatically anyway. And then once you got that border, hit enter, and you'll be cropping the image. And then if I save this as, like if I override it again as a PNG, I want to replace it. And now if I bring it in Illustrator, if I bring it again to Illustrator, where's my image? Yeah, now I can line it up easier, I think. I'm going to close these tabs, zoom in. I'm going to line it up on the left side of my artboard, and then hold shift, align the right side, and it should scale up perfectly fine with my drawing. And I can use the up and down arrow keys to find the level, or the bottom. I can do the alignment at the bottom. That's easier, no? So it's right there. And transparency, 30%. And bring up the Poché. So that's the section on the section shadows for the other section. Okay? Any questions about this rendering overlap? Is it too much? Huh? Sure. Thank you for reminding me that. So I put the shadows in another layer, and this is actually layer order in Illustrator, right? So my images, So my image here is on the shadow layer. This one is in layer 1. I'm going to move it down to shadow layer as well. I'm going to hide these guys so that we get rid of all the clutter. But basically, you want the images, the shadow images, to be under the Poché layer. Right? If it's above the Poché layer, you're going to get other stuff that you don't want to see. You want to put it all the way at the back. Sure. I mean, then if you want to switch the layer of it, click here to create new layer. Right bottom to the layer manager. New layer. Double click to rename it. Shadow. And then choose your image. Click here. Hold click and then drag it to the layer you want to move that object to. Okay, so now it will be located on the shadows. I'm going to do the same thing to this image. So click here, hold it, move it to shadows. So now they will be in this layer. But I still want them to be under the Poché layer so that I only use their shadows basically. Okay? Now, the other stuff, let me download some of the files I uploaded. So I'm going to just download some of these. Let's do single trees. Under silhouettes, there are tons of silhouettes available here, even 18th century silhouettes, and I actually use 18th century silhouettes for this image. I don't know why, but I like 18th century. So office people, Munsell silhouette. Let's look at them. So when you open them, you get stuff like this, right? It's vector art. So let's say I want to use one of these for my section. Let's grab this guy. I'm doing Control C, moving on to my other file, and I'm going to create a new layer here. Call it silhouettes, and then once that layer is activated, I'm going to paste. Now I get layer 2. I'm going to hold the red rectangle there and then move it to silhouette. Now, here's the thing. I want to once you're done with something here in Illustrator, you should lock it. So I'm done with my shadow layer, the images I placed. So just lock them. Otherwise, they will get in your way when you're trying to edit stuff, right? And for these guys, what I want to do is find the right scale for them. So how tall is an average person? Average male, 6 feet? Yeah. So what does 6 feet correspond to in my model? So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 steps, right? So this is technically 8 feet. So this has to be scaled down. So I'm going to scale this down until it matches. Kind of, you can eyeball these as well. You don't have to be precise. That's kind of the size of that figure. Right? I can bring in another one. Scale it the same way. You can choose one, hold Alt, and then make a copy. Reuse it somewhere else. But I actually don't want to see the same silhouettes appearing twice on the same drawing. I think you should use different ones everywhere else. Right, so let's bring another guy. Maybe this guy with a hat. So I'm going to bring in first, put it to silhouette layer, bring him down, hold shift, and maybe he's just sitting down in this room. Okay, so it gives a kind of a scale as well. And let me show you some trees. Single trees. Just grab some of them. Let's say I want to use this guy, and maybe this one. Control C again. Control V. So how tall is an average tree? 27.9 feet, okay. So for the trees, I would go with the negative space you have in your drawings. So for instance, for a section, This is the negative space. I would just, kind of eyeball it. Maybe it's this big. And then give them some transparency as well. So let's make this 30% transparent. These guys need to be larger as well. So, and here's the other thing I want to mention. So let's say I want to put it here. I need to put it in such a way that it's behind this wall, right? It cannot be in front of the wall. So this silhouette needs to be under the shadow layer. I'm going to put it down under the shadow layer. But here's the problem I run into. Because my shadow layer has transparency, it's still going to show my tree. So what I need to do is you can create an in-between layer on both of those and add a white fill here so that you can block the view to the tree, right? So I can go to the rectangle tool, select white fill, and just draw a big white fill here. I did already, but the shadow layer has transparency. So technically what you need to do is, if you want to get nerdy about it, I can show you an even easier, more practical way. In Photoshop, you can create two versions of this. Okay, one is the actual shadows where we're going to add transparency. This one, right? The other one is this guy filled with all white. So what I would do is create two layers, put the all white, and then put the shadows on top of it and add transparency to it. So whatever I put on behind the shadow layer, it won't be visible. Does everybody understand what I just said? Right? Because I need a white fill that actually overlaps with all the pixels of my shadow layer. And I'll just show you quickly how to do that since I use this one. I'm going to hold Control and click on this image on my layer tab in Photoshop. It will select all the pixels, all the active pixels of this image. And then you can you can either use brush or there should be a paint bucket tool. Under gradient tool, if you click hold, there's paint bucket tool. And then you want to switch to white. And then paint bucket everywhere. And make sure this is all white everywhere. It looks good to me. Now I'm going to save this as another PNG and call the shadow 2 white fill. Hit OK. Now that layer 12, I'm going to bring this guy in there. Control X, Control V. So this guy is going to be located under layer 12, and it's going to be located exactly the same position as the shadow layer. Right? So I need to scale it down as well. And it's going to go all the way down. Now the silhouettes could be above it, and this has to be above my shadow layer and silhouettes above that. So it's going to look something like this. This guy above that as well. Now this is the white fill. If I create a new layer underneath it, and I can put trees in there. Let's say I put a tree here. If I move that to layer 13, it will already be taken care of, right? I don't have to have multiple white fills basically to take care of the transparency because there's an overall white fill behind the shadow lines now, the shadow layer. Right? So I can make copies of this. Let's grab this guy again. So let's lock this first. This guy. Maybe I have 2 or 3 of them running. Okay? That's what I want to see for my stuff. Full blade image, no text, silhouettes, shadows, trees. Just so for the floor plan, I'm going to do this a bit quick because I want you guys to understand what I'm doing. I'm not going to use any other tool. I'm just going to use the same stuff I used today. So again, go back to your model. Right? Now, how is my clipping plane going to be oriented for the plan drawing? It's going to be horizontal. Right. So clipping plane, I don't have to do vertical. I can do 3-point or simply draw a rectangle. Right? Now, let's find a nice place to draw a plan. So I'm going to go up. This could be a nice drawing. Right, it will show me the context of the landscape. It will show me these blocks. If you want it to be an underground drawing, which is also nice, then you may want to even go like inside the landscape, but this doesn't have much detail. Right, so it's going to be a lot of black on a board. It's not going to look nice. So just find a point. This is okay. This is, I think, has the best and the most detail to show. So I would go with something like this. Now this is, I think, going to be a lot easier to make. In top view, enable the clipping plane to be active in top view as well. Now, how do I cut the section for my plan? How do I get the same outlines for these walls? How do I cut the section for my plan? Yeah, basically it. But I do my section now in an elevation view, right? Because I'm sectioning it there and I'm going to project down. So I do my section. Let's activate the section layer. Section. Select objects for sections. These are my objects. Start of section. Where is it? Did I get it? Let me see if I got it. Section. Yeah. These are my section walls, right? And then make 2D. Absolutely, it's the same process basically. So I will be in this top view while this is enabled. Top view, make 2D, choose these objects, everything, current C plane is fine, hit OK, move it out. That's my section line, I'm going to delete that. I mean, technically, if you know the elements that are cut, you could just fill these up in Illustrator as well. You don't have to deal with the Poché, right? Like I'm seeing all these double lines, so it might be even easier. But if you want to use them more precisely, you can bring them in. So these are my section walls. I think these are already cleaned up, so this is already good to go. I'll just bring this guy here. So these walls are going to be pocheed. These surfaces are going to be cleaned up. And here's the other thing. I think also you should do a lot of fills in plan view because it's going to be a really empty drawing. And you should also do a shadow. It should make it look even better, no? So I could like chop off the top of it, take a top view rendering, so I get some nice shadows and overlay it. Yeah. Should I see it on your screen?